Welcome to Tuesday night's Hotline Live, brought to you by NordVPN. I'm delighted to be joined by Record Sports' Keith Jackson and Craig Swan. Guys, how's it going?
Hi, Daniel.
Very well done. Yeah, good.
It's been a while since we had Swanee on. It's good to see you, Swanee.
Yeah, and you boys too. Yep.
Before we go any further, guys, I need to big up our sponsors, right? This sounds like
Again.
this sounds like I'm making it up, right? But NordVPN, you can switch your virtual location, which allows you to save money purchasing flights and hotels, subscriptions from other countries at a cheap price. And last night, Mrs. Daniel and I were booking our holiday, and we managed to save £28 by going on to NordVPN, saying we were in Canada. Bob's your uncle, £28.
Sure, you want me saying that on the... Really?
Don't get too excited, guys.
What have you got? The special NordVPN Charles Green package?
And look, if anyone's watching, they want to get involved, there is a discount for NordVPN in our description on YouTube, Facebook, and I don't think it's
Dan, I think you've made a mistake there, son. But carry on.
Swanee, before I get us done for fraud, how's it going?
Good, thank you. Not too bad.
Hold on. Get you done.
Yeah.
Listen, we're a team.
Yeah, I'm good.
Swanee,
thank you.
very good. It's good to see you. Where should we start then, Keith? There's plenty for us to talk about. I think the place for us to start actually is big breaking news for Rangers fans.
Potentially, yep. I think they will learn more over the course of the next 24 hours, but I think there's a serious medical concern over Mohamed Diomande going into the title run-in. He's obviously been at times a key performer for Rangers in midfield. What I'm told is that he suffered, as you can see there, I believe it's a bit gruesome. His shoulder popped out of its joint during the first half of the Scottish Cup quarter-final against Celtic. And that's why he was nowhere to be seen at St Mirren at the weekend, where he didn't make the bench, having started against Celtic. I think that the general kind of consensus was he was taken off against Celtic because, I don't know, for tactical reasons to get Tochi Chukwueze into the midfield, or because he had been booked in that first half. Apparently not. Apparently he was in a bit of distress, and they're now having to determine whether or not it's a full-scale dislocation, which could require surgery, and you'd be unlikely to see him play another game, you would have thought, between now and the end of the season in that case. If it's a partial dislocation, that can be not so bad. That could be a couple of weeks. And if it's something less than that and it's real kind of minimal damage, he could yet make the squad for the weekend. But I think Rangers are sweating a bit. I think they expect to find out fuller details tomorrow. But yeah, a bit of a shock. And, you know, Danny Rowe will be frustrating for him because he's been waiting for 3 months to get Connor Barron back to give him a full array of options in the middle of the pitch. Connor Barron comes back off the bench at St Mirren, looks quite bright, looks quite lively, but Diomande's not there because he's resting this injury, and there's now a significant risk that he might not be around now for at least a couple of weeks. So, yeah, I think that is a bit of a blow, because you kind of need all hands on deck when you're getting down to a run-in as tight as this one is.
It was a year ago yesterday that Diomande scored in Rangers' 3-2 win over Celtic at Celtic Park. And I remember thinking that Diomande was absolutely crucial at that time. Remember they went over Fenerbahce. I think he was really good as well. But see now, I don't know if you guys agree, I don't think he's as crucial as he used to be. I don't think...
He's a good option. He's a good option for them. Yeah. And to be fair, in that cup game against Celtic, I thought he started it quite brightly.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I think he's a bit of a Marmite character for a lot of the Rangers support this season. Some think he's a waste of a shirt. Others think he's still got the potential to go on and be a big contributor. I quite like him overall, but I don't think he's had a terrific season. But I do know if you're Danny Rowe, the last thing you need at this point is to be told there's another one disappearing into the casualty ward when what you need is, as I said, all hands on deck and all possible options available. So it's something Rangers could do without, and I'm sure they'll be keeping their fingers crossed tonight, hoping for good news tomorrow.
Absolutely. Is he a player you've rated before, Swanee?
Yeah, I do. He's obviously proven himself to be effective, as you say. At this stage of the season last year, he was really growing into the shot and growing into his role at Rangers. And it has been a bit up and down for him this season. He's not really performed. At times this season, it's been a struggle for Rangers in terms of the blend in the middle of the park just to get it absolutely right. Again, I agree with Keith that Connor Barron coming back on Sunday, given he was certainly one of Rangers' better players. So through the first half of the season, getting him back will make a big difference. But the options thing is important at this time. It's been incredible this season actually with with all the contenders in the title race. You always have injuries to deal with. There's serious setbacks amongst the three of them, and I'm sure we'll on the other clubs later on. But yeah, I think Diomande would certainly have a part to play if he's available, and if he's not available, it's going to be a blow, of course.
Yeah, well, I just think it's the frustrating thing for Rowe will be it's a 1 in, 1 out. You spend 3 months wanting Connor Barron back in. Now, obviously, Connor Barron injured his knee in January, and Rangers were able to bring Chukwueze in, which was good. Looks to all intents and purposes like a right good bit of business, and he has beefed up the options in the middle of the pitch. But in an ideal world, you don't want to get Connor Barron back into the mix only to find out that, as I said, 1 in, 1 out with Diomande disappearing. So, as I said, I think this will be a nervous 24 hours for Diomande and for Rangers to establish just the full extent of this.
The one thing I will say, sorry Keith, the one thing I will say on the back of what you said there, at this stage of a season, after maybe 7-8 months of a season, there's probably not a manager in world football that's playing with a full deck at the moment in terms of squad options. And if I don't want it to sound as it's been dismissive of Diomande, but I think with Barron coming back, that's one Rangers could get away with. There's maybe other ones that are a wee bit more important, so I don't think it's utterly calamitous if he's out there. Like you say, I agree you want options and you want the opportunity to switch things up during games.
In the comments, Big Rab says it's funny. Celtic have had 6+ starting 11 players injured most of the season, which, as you say, Swan, it's a fair point. Green Machine, though, says Diomande doesn't hold back, so he'll get a few injuries. The other comment, guys, that I need to touch on that's come into us, and if you're watching at home, get involved in the conversation. Kev says, I'd rather have a heart attack than Steve Clarke being the next Celtic manager. Now, that's the headline on our show today. Could he be a potential Celtic target? And Keith, that's off the back of yesterday at his press conference. He kind of talked about Scotland's future.
Yeah, well, I'd asked Big Kev there if he'd rather have Wilfred Nancy back and what sort of state that would leave him in. I don't know. I was at the press conference yesterday. I did say to you on the show last night, Dan, that there was some really significant news that would come out later on because it was from the embargoed bit of the press conference with the daily newspapers. And it was during that section that we asked him about his contract and it became quite clear. I actually thought, you know what Steve Clarke's like? He's never all that comfortable answering questions. He tries to dismiss everything. He get asked about the contract, and his first answer was, "Oh, look, I've been talking to loads of people and I've been running about, and there's nothing really to report." And I thought that's him sort of straight batting this, but we might as well continue and ask a few more. And the more questions he get asked, it was almost as if he thought, "Do you know what? What's the harm in me saying?" So he went on, and I was really quite surprised by the extent to which he went on and saying, there is no agreement, I'm waiting, the ball's in their court, they've not given me an offer to think about. I was 75% out the door, only 25% just a few months ago, willing to commit. I'm now closer to 50-50. I'm liking this. I'm bringing in youngsters like Finlay Curtis because I've got one eye on what comes next. But that's all down to the SFA. If they want to keep on winning games and qualifying for tournaments, then they'll make me an offer. If not, I'll speak to some clubs. And I'm thinking, this is really interesting. So I said to him, well, do you think that you're kind of handicapped or hamstrung a little bit in the fact that you're going to a World Cup? You want to keep Scotland at that World Cup until into July. I said, there are clubs that will be back at pre-season. By that point, does that not give you a bit of an issue in terms of being available to go and pick up the reins at a club? And he said, well, it basically depends which clubs. And the inference from that was not if you're going to a club in the big leagues, because they're all off. They're still on the beaches at that point. If it was the Celtic job, for example, you might need to be back as early as humanly possible. but not if not if you thought you were about to walk into a job in the English Premier League or somewhere like that, where he is still held in very high regard, and he always was. But his achievements at Scotland will have cranked that up a bit. So I think that is he a contender for the Celtic job? Should he be a contender for the Celtic job? Well, Steve Clarke basically yesterday, short of standing up, waving his arms in the air and saying, "I'm here and I'm ready for a conversation," that's pretty much the equivalent of what was said yesterday. And I think it gives people reason to have a think, well, maybe they hadn't been thinking before. If you're Celtic, and here's my argument, that's why I brought up Wilfred Nonsi. I think Celtic, well, I don't think, we all know Celtic get their fingers burnt by trying to think a little bit out of the box, try to do something modern and a little bit different, and get their version in of the sort of, there's a whole generation of PowerPoint peps out there. There's Big Wilfred, bring him in, give him a shot. And it was catastrophic. And you had a guy on national radio last night who was on the other side of the city, exact same thing. And he was on 2 hours on the radio last night. I don't think he took the blame for anything that went wrong anywhere at any of the clubs he's ever been. Permanently in denial. Wilfred Nonsi seemed to think he couldn't understand why he was getting such a hard time. Martin O'Neill comes along not once but twice, steadies the ship for Celtic, shows what an old head can do, a guy that knows all the tricks of the trade, how to get the best out of people, how to put together a formation, not a fanciful formation, which you must stick to rigidly at all costs, because that comes first. But assess your squad, see what its strengths are, see what its weaknesses are, put out a team that is best able to go and win a game of football. That's all Martin O'Neill's done. He's simplified it. That's what Steve Clarke's been doing throughout his entire managerial career, and most certainly during these qualification campaigns at Scotland. So if Celtic were looking at it and thinking, do we want a safer pair of hands? Do we want a Martin O'Neill Mark II, if you like? Then maybe Steve Clarke's an ideal candidate for that. But I'm not sure how the Celtic fans would think about that. Big Kev has set the tone there by saying it's heart attack material.
Well, funny you say that, Keith, because we've got plenty of comments coming in. Kev's actually responded to us when you said, would you rather have Wilfred Nancy? And he very succinctly says, no. So thanks for that, Kev. But Celtic fans don't seem too keen on the idea. John says Steve Clarke's football philosophy is 180 degrees away from Celtic's attacking style. No way, Jose. Chris Gardner says Stevie Clarke's brand of football is the Timu version of Simeone at Atletico. Mark simply says Clarke's football is criminal. I think he gets a bit of a raw deal. I mean, 3 out of 4 tournaments for Scotland.
And I also think, Daniel, listen, there's 2 or 3 parts to this I'd like to pick up on from what Keith said. The first one being, I certainly have no idea what the vast majority of the Celtic fans think. However, I do have a feeling that had Steve Clarke's name been floated at the beginning of this season, in terms of if Brendan Rodgers leaves next summer, there'd be no chance. For the reasons that have been mentioned there, but for the reasons that have been outlined by Keith, the Wilfred Nancy thing, everything that happened, there has been a kind of sharp intake of breath of what might be the thing that gets the job done. The footballing aspect, I understand supporters having that concern. However, I would caveat that by the fact that when Steve Clarke's gone into Kilmarnock, to enable him to get results against the likes of Rangers and Celtic, he can't go gung-ho and play front foot football. When he's the manager of Scotland, a lot of the games they're underdog, and he's having to get results against bigger nations, and he's fine. Now, I know there will be an argument that when Scotland plays some of the lesser nations are maybe not as good as what they should be, and that was an argument that was put against the likes of Davy Moyes, wasn't it? When he had like a style of football, and then he went to Manchester United, and people said that he couldn't really translate it that way. But I'm not sure that would be exactly the case. I think if Clarke had better players, if Clarke consistently had squads and teams getting into games with better players in the opposition, he would build a way of playing football. I think he's tactically adept and very, very good. We've all seen that. The other part that sort of caught my attention yesterday was I kind of felt like the World Cup was going to be the natural end of this successful that Steve
we all did, Swan.
Scotland. I'm just quite surprised when I read the stuff this morning, the fact that he seemed so keen. I don't know whether that, listen, I dealt with Steve Clarke plenty during his time when he was at Kilmarnock. I know that he doesn't say things without reason. He's not going to say something willy-nilly. You do want, I think these things go up and down, don't they? At the moment, the Scotland job's absolutely wonderful because Scotland have qualified for a World Cup, plotting and planning, preparations, and everybody loves them. He's getting carried, then you don't qualify and you're having bad times, he's getting caned, and they'll probably think to himself, well, now's maybe time to get back to the club. But I was quite surprised to hear him sounding so
warm on it.
Yeah, to the prospect of staying on again. But listen, maybe that's just a genius bit of politics. Keep everybody's doors open.
I don't know, Swanee. I'm the same.
So you're better qualified to speak about it than me. You were sitting right in front of him, and I know what it's like when you speak to someone and how you can tell body language and all that. So you're certainly better at telling the people than I am because I wasn't there.
Yeah, like Swanee, I wouldn't say that. You listen. You've been around Steve Clarke as much as I've been around Steve Clarke, but I was quite surprised. So he's guarded at first, as I said, straight back at the first question. And more, it seemed to dawn on him, this might not be the worst idea in the world, just to have this conversation, just to put it out there, that I'm actually really open to having a conversation with the SFA about staying on, much more open than I was just a wee while ago. But I've got nothing to talk about because they've not made me an offer. And by the way, I might need to start speaking to clubs because I need to ask myself what comes next.
Yeah,
I just felt, I don't know if it was leverage. I think he's an honest enough broker, Steve Clarke. But it was almost as if halfway through getting asked those questions yesterday, he started to think, maybe this isn't the worst idea in the world to actually put something out there. And I think it'll come as a surprise, certainly to Scotland fans, that Steve Clarke is actually really coming round to the idea of staying on, but he's not sure that the SFA want him.
It's as unusual, Keith, in the fact that you can totally understand from Steve Clarke's point of view. I would imagine, listen, football management is a game where no one's really sure ever what's happening from month to month. But it does seem a bit weird that we go into the tournament thinking, okay, when that last game finishes, that's the end of it. But the SFA maybe think to themselves, well, we don't want to commit just now because what happens if we go to another finals and our calamity and the team doesn't perform?
And Wilfred Nance is available.
Listen, everybody knows my take on it. I would have Steve Clarke for as long as possible as Scotland manager. I mean, I've not.
Me too. That's the no-brainer side to this.
Yeah, I have no question in that. But I'm surprised at the fact the SFA haven't at least put
the golden handcuffs on him.
Yeah, something.
Listen, the SFA have never had it so good financially in this century.
Yeah,
they're qualified for 3 out of the last 4 tournaments. The money is rolling into Hampden sixth floor. This guy should be protected at all costs.
And what does that tell the manager? The thing that I've just talked about there. I mean, if you're the manager, you're not entitled to think I should have a mega bucks contract put in front of me just now to go on beyond this World Cup, having just got the country there. And the fact that it's not happened, does that make you think, well, wait a minute, do they actually want me to stay on or what?
Yeah,
I think the SFA should be more proactive on this.
It's an interesting one, but apropos nothing, Swanee, he then threw in, it was him that mentioned clubs, that he might need to speak to clubs and all this. And it was just little bit by little bit, you're thinking, layers of the onion are coming off here a little bit.
Yeah, you need to be up the back, not to think people have had conversations or somebody's spoken to someone about.
It was. I think at one point somebody asked him, one of our guys asked him, has there been contact from any club, Steve? And he just kind of looked at him and says, how long have you been doing this?
Yeah.
So there was your answer right there. So I think it's interesting.
And not alone, Keith. What managers in this get into this World Cup that are, sought after from your Thomas Tuchel's to Martinez's that we've spoken about before? There is a raft of managers who are going to be in exactly the same boat as Steve Clarke.
Everybody wants a World Cup manager.
Indeed.
That's just a fact. Now, if you're Celtic, are you doing your job properly? Even if you ultimately decide that you want something out the box and fresh, forward thinking and young and modern and great to watch, I'm not sure you're doing your job right if you haven't been one of the clubs that have at least had that initial conversation, just to see if there could be a sort of a mutual understanding and a beneficial relationship. I think I would want to have it, even if it was just to score them off the list.
Just
saying,
test
"Ah,
the
we
water.
couldn't work with
I
him."
would agree with you, but recent evidence would make you wonder.
If Celtic were being run professionally, Swanee, you're absolutely correct.
There's plenty of forthright opinions in the comments, guys. Give me a minute to run through a few of these. Ian says John McGlynn would do a good job for Scotland. Mo says Big Ange for Scotland. Chris is one of a number of people saying Motherwell will take Clarke when Askew goes to Celtic. Free-flowing football from next season. Green Machine says Alex Neil has a better CV than most of the names get mentioned for Celtic. Big Rab says Clarke would be a good manager at Celtic. He's part of the best attacking coaching at Chelsea, but he said he wouldn't manage Celtic or Rangers. David, though, I mean, look, opinions like this, we should have lost every qualifier after the World Cup. We got there purely on luck. Steve Clarke isn't the answer for Celtic. Either keep Martin or go for Bertalascu. Sorry, let me finish these. Green Machine says, don't want to see McInnes at Scotland job after Hearts collapse. Keep Clarke at Scotland. Jimmy says, I would rather have Arnold Clarke.
Can I just jump in there? What Hearts collapse?
There's a lot to unpack in that statement,
There's a
Swanee.
lot
I'm
to
glad you picked
What collapse is that?
That's the wishful thinking collapse.
And finally, your loyal Muppet says Clarke has a wealth of experience. He'd be a good bet for Celtic. James, though, says Clarke should be nowhere near Celtic. Askew is the no-brainer.
Right. Where do we start with that?
Plenty
There
of
is a lot of in vogue, isn't there, in fashion, and Jens Bertalascu is in fashion at the moment in Scotland. But there's got
And rightly so, Swanee.
And he's
Rightly
done.
so.
He's
Been brilliant this. He's been brilliant this season.
His team are good to watch, and he plays some good stuff. And the argument I've heard put forward, which I think is a correct one, if he can, what he's doing with the greatest of respect to the players at Motherwell, with the budget that he's got and the players that he's utilising at the moment, what you could do with a higher standard of player. If he's managing to get some of these boys play the way they're playing just now,
And a bigger budget, yeah.
and a bigger budget, I get that. I get all of that. But there's got to be a lot of other candidates out there. There has to be.
Here's the thing, and this is so we've just talked about. Wilfred Nosey obviously was a high risk candidate, right? And Celtic, for whatever reason, decided they were prepared to take that risk, and they did. And look what happened: shambles. I think if you've been part of that decision-making process, you might be naturally inclined to want to take less of a risk next time out. I would accept that Jens Bertalascu constitutes less of a risk for the simple reason that he knows the league. He's shown that his style of football can be effective. It's been really impressive. It's been a great watch. There's going to be, I think there would be a positive reaction just based on what he's done at Motherwell this season. So that they're all the kind of ticks in the box for Askew. But there is another side to Askew, and that is he a one-season wonder? Could it be that the sort of Jimmy Tellin factor now?
There's been a lot of big games this season, Keith, where Motherwell have failed.
That's a good point, Swanee.
The final against St Mirren was a big night in the spotlight, and they got 4-1.
4-1,
right?
yeah.
And then got them and play the cup tie against Aberdeen at Pittodrie when Motherwell are absolutely flying, and everybody's talking about them potential title contenders, and also this could be the trophy.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost that game. But with the greatest of respect to Motherwell, the difference is when that happens, it's almost just like brushed aside. If you lose those two cup ties,
because you're still overachieving.
You're still overachieving. There's massive fallout. So.
It's worth saying as well, Mark in the comments says 7 months form. Is that good enough for Celtic? Did we learn nothing from Nancy?
Yeah, and I think that's the question, isn't it? And also there's other aspects to take into it as well. I don't know Jens Bertalascu for the guy that lives across the road, right? I don't know about his mentality. But the spotlight and scrutiny of managing Celtic is very different from what it is managing Motherwell. Now, he may take to it like a complete duck to water if he gets the opportunity. I don't know, but that's something else that has to be factored in. He certainly speaks very well and speaks like he would take to it, no problem. But we've heard plenty of those guys in the past.
Yeah, and so when you're saying that,
I mean that's not a slight on Jens Bertalascu, by the way. What I mean is,
there's no way of knowing
until you get into it. That is what I mean. Like, look, people, think you only have to listen.
I remember sitting here saying the exact same thing.
You had to listen to Russell Martin last night on the. He said that, and he'd been at Rangers as a player.
Yeah, And listen, we were saying the exact same thing. That there was a general sort of excitement about Wilfred Nonce saying, "Oh, this could." And I said, "Look, he's done reasonably well. You just do not know until you're confronted by this environment if you're going to be cut out for it or not." That's what I'm saying about Jens Bertolascu, is at least you can put a half ticks at least in that box, because he's well aware of Scottish football.
Yeah.
He's well aware of the size of Celtic. Nothing about it should come as a surprise to him, whereas everything seemed to come as a surprise to Wilfred Nonce. So that's advantageous in terms of putting a case forward for Askew. But one of the comments there was at Mark that said, "Can you give him this job based in 7 months?" I think that's as excited as I am with Askew and everything he's done, that's a valid comment. But also then to further validate my kind of question about Steve Clarke is, well, are you going to base your 7 months kind of track record, or are you going to base it on, there's a guy that went into a Scotland side that hadn't qualified for anything since France 98 and has now qualified us for 3 tournaments?
Do you know the other thing?
That's an extraordinary level of success in the context of being a Scotland manager. There's no question about that.
See as well, Keith, I think it's, if I can find it, Ian McIntosh makes the comment here that the thing about Steve Clarke is that he always gets his teams playing above themselves, punching above their weight. And that's something that Celtic haven't done in Europe for a very long time.
Yeah.
So,
can you imagine Steve Clarke and a Celtic manager in the Champions League? Some of the results he would maybe dig out.
Aye,
that's the equivalent. What he's doing with Scotland by qualifying for these tournaments would be, it's a similar equivalence of taking a Celtic side into the Champions League.
Yeah.
So I'm just not sure. I can understand why there would be a sort of negative reaction to it, but I just thought that after seeing in practice in front of your own eyes the Wilfred Nonce version of Celtic versus the Martin O'Neill version of Celtic, I would have thought that might have won a lot of Celtic fans over to the notion that, do you know what, first and foremost, let's get a guy in the door that knows how to set a team out to get to win games of football. And let's worry about the stylistic issues after that. Or maybe that's more of a Rangers philosophy. I don't know.
Well, look, one last visit to the comments on this. Canadian Hammer says Celtic need a complete rebuild. Experience is crucial. Clarke or Bellamy. I mean, I don't know how much experience Bellamy's got, but there you go. Rebel says could turn out to be Wilfred Askew. Who knows? John says Celtic's next manager needs to be someone who knows how to do a major rebuild. And McKenna, who's a big jambo, comes back saying, let them say it's a collapse. They are in for a shock. Quite right, McKenna. Guys, you mentioned Russell Martin earlier, Keith. He broke his Rangers silence on the BBC's Monday Night Club last night. Earlier on today, we had the Record Rangers podcast with Andy Newport and Scott McDermott. They gave their take on it. Do you want to have a listen and see what they had to say about it?
Stop asking the question, just play
it. Daniel?
I did that deliberately, actually.
I said no.
We'll just move on then. That's fine.
No, go on.
I've just saying, no, listen, guys, I'm running this show. Let's hear what they had to say.
Russell Martin was on 5 Live last night with Mark Chapman and our very own Chris Sutton. What was your take on what he had to say? Sort of held his hands up, admitted he was to blame for the way his Rangers career crumbled. Only regrets he had, I thought was quite interesting, he said, was in some aspects he probably went too far, made too many changes, especially to the squad too soon. But in terms of his tactical sense, it was interesting to hear him say he probably should have not only just stuck to his guns a bit more, he probably should have went further with the style of play, which I must admit, having sat the first 7 league games of the season trying to work out what it was that he was doing as they passed the ball endlessly along the back line, can you get on board with what he was trying to say last night?
Listen, certain bits. I mean, it was great to finally hear him speak after this long speak about Rangers, but I don't know, you just always get the sense with Russell Martin that as much as he talks a good game, he still doesn't quite get it.
Do you know what I mean? In terms of being the Rangers manager. And look, as I touched on earlier on with like Giga and Fernandes, he's probably right to say he needed more time. There was a huge amount of change. We all know that at boardroom level and on the pitch in terms of new players and all that. So he probably did, maybe would have needed more time to try and get it right. But he knows and we know you just don't get that time. And I think he'll look back, he touched on it last night, I think he'll look back and realise he should have probably done things differently. And in terms of the tactical stuff, as you've said there, I mean, it's okay to say that now. I mean, we were there, we were sitting watching a Rangers crowd going apoplectic at times with some of the style of play and some of the passing and the lack of pace and the lack of speed in terms of moving the ball. So it was a bad period. It's probably easy to kind of forget just how bad it was when you were there at the time. And look, I know he's held his hands up to certain bits saying it was his fault, and I'm glad about that, because I think when something goes wrong like that as a manager, I think you're better just coming out and saying, look, it didn't happen for me. I made some bad decisions. Maybe the wrong club for him in terms of the style that he wants and how he operates as a manager. There's no shame in that. He just wasn't. He just wasn't cut out to be Rangers manager for one reason or another. And I'm sure. Listen, he'll get other jobs. He's obviously that. I'm assuming that'll be him back now. Being quite
he's turned down opportunities since.
Aye. But I'm sure he'll be more visible now in the media, and that'll probably be the start last night of him getting kind of back involved and getting his name out there. And I'm convinced clubs will make him offers, and there'll be clubs out there that are perfectly suited to Russell Martin's style of management. Unfortunately, Rangers wasn't one of them. And listen, I hope I'm wrong, because I actually quite liked him as a guy when he was here. But the big question is, will he ever get to manage as big a club as Rangers in the future? I think you'd probably need to doubt that at the moment. He might go and...
He did acknowledge he'd made mistakes. I think one of the interesting things is he held his hands up to was sort of showing too much of his personality and maybe the idiosyncrasies of himself in interviews and in press conferences, which I think is one of the things he maybe get strung out, get criticism for, they get stick for. I mean, we all know the stuff with the vegan stuff and all that came in. I mean, I think he's made mistakes in interviews about giving. He acknowledged that. That's the sort of stuff that maybe he shouldn't have let people get a glimpse into, but
none of that would have mattered.
I think the important thing that you mentioned there, that he just didn't grasp it, because and I think you even got another insight to that again last night, where he spoke about, I know there's a need to win right away, and within 4 weeks when we had so much change at the club with new owners, new football structure, 14 new players, and then Champions League qualifiers after 4 weeks. But then he's still talking about it'd been good to get some time and just time to make the changes. It's like, I still don't think he ever grasped the fact that he had to hit the ground winning from day one. It couldn't take 6 months to put in place the foundations. I still don't think he's grasped the need that he had to be a winning manager from day one. And I think that is why he was the wrong choice for Rangers, because he felt that this was a project, or this was something that he could mould eventually week by week, instead of going no. I mean, he even had a wee aside at one point. He says, just remember, I only lost one league game when I was up there. I was like, okay.
That sums it up. That sums it up, basically. That's what I mean by just even now, no quite getting it. I mean, you're talking about the stuff like his hair and the vegan stuff, and that. None of that matters if you just beat Motherwell and Dundee the first 2 games of the season. I think you had Motherwell, Dundee and St Mirren. With all due respect to those clubs, and obviously Motherwell have went on to do great this season, but they weren't at that stage when Rangers played them first day of the campaign. That he couldn't have got an easier start as a Rangers manager. Motherwell, Dundee, St Mirren, to ease yourself in. What an opportunity to go and get 9 points and really put a marker down. Instead, I mean, what was it? Rangers went, was it like 6-7 games into the season? They had to win a league game at home or something crazy like that. I mean, you can't get away with that. Even when there is big changes, even when there is a raft of new players and a new manager and a CEO and new owners, you cannot get away with no beating Dundee at Ibrox. I'm sorry. And that's the bit that he didn't quite get. No, wait, I go back to the quote. I think it was Patrick Stewart used at the time. No, we recognise and we know that we need to build the plane while flying it. That's what they had to. That was the job. And unfortunately, these guys like Russell Martin, like Patrick Stewart, they failed to do that in that period of time.
Keith, what did you make of Russell Martin's comments last night?
Oh man! Right, first thing, Andy and Scott sounded as if they both had PTSD there, like Vietnam vets. You don't know, man. You weren't there. But Russell Martin, I listened to it and I was quite looking forward to it because obviously Chris Sutton had been very vocal during Russell Martin's time up here. Chris wasn't so vocal last night, and I understand that because they've obviously trying to put a show out. Russell's looking well there. No, I listened to a man there in denial over the course of 2 hours, blaming everyone but himself. Okay, now and again, he kind of half took responsibility, but it wasn't really. It was all caveated, i.e. somebody else was to blame. So I'm afraid he's got and I think in many ways he's a nice guy, but he's got this horrible habit of not accepting responsibility for anything, of blaming it on everybody else. I mean, at one point last night, he was defending what went on at Southampton, saying, we got a hard time. I'd lost my football director because he went to Manchester United and they didn't replace him. So what chance did I have? And then we were getting pilloried because we were losing slack goals. Yes, because your team was playing like the Ant Hill mob at the back. They were giving away goals left, right and centre. They were the worst single performing team in the history of the Premier League when he got the sack. But there was no acknowledgement of that. And unless... And he said that he's went away and he's thought about stuff and he'll be better next time. But it was very much in the Mark Warburton. From now on, plan B will be to do plan A just better. And his stuff there that he felt he was obviously feels he was moving further and further away from his principles and his philosophy and as I said, the sort of PowerPoint peps that you get these days. They've got a very set in stone, this is how I'm going to do it. He obviously feels that he's made a mistake by moving away from that, which he had to do because it was so bad and it was only going to get worse. So he made changes to try and be a little bit more pragmatic. They made him a little bit better, but not enough, not anywhere near enough. And if he's saying that on reflection, he's now decided that the way he wanted to set his team up, which if you recall, and I think it was a home game at home to Anderlecht, he had Nico Raskin, for some reason, playing almost out in the left touchline so that Max Aarons could come inside and play centre midfield as an inverted fullback. Max Aarons, and he's, 10 months, however long he's been here, I've probably seen him hit about 4 balls forwards. Every other pass goes back the way. A guy that quite clear, and it's not his fault, he's not a centre midfield player. Why would you take Nico Raskin, tell him to play on the left touchline to enable Max Aarons to come in and build play for the centre of the pitch? It was from day one, from when the covers came off, it was insanity. It was never going to work. And Russell Martin's now looks back on this and thinks, well, if only I'd just stuck to my principles, it might get better quicker. It wasn't going to get better quicker. It was just a nightmare experience for him, and particularly for the Rangers supporters.
Gavaldo says in the comments, if Rangers win this title, he'll say it was all his team and he'd be given more time, he'd have won it also.
where's my medal? I think Mizuno launched a brilliant point up there, which was, see all this stuff, and Russell Martin felt he was being hard done by. And I think he's too quick to play the victim card. I remember one press conference very early on, might have even have been after the second or third game at St Mirren, where they dropped points. And he walked into a press conference, apropos nothing, and then started talking about, yeah, people don't like me because I've got long hair and a middle parting. And Mizuno made the point, it doesn't matter.
You can see it's on the
what he
screen
likes
now,
to eat,
now.
how he wears his hair, whether or not he wears brown brogues or a shirt and tie, none of that matters. You saw that the Rangers fans, when they were getting success under Mark Warburton, they're running about with bin bags on their head or bread bags on their head. Yeah. So they would all have jumped on the Russell Martin train if he was capable of getting them results. But it was, not only was he incapable of getting results, he then had a very arrogant way of dealing with that and explaining himself. And all it did was succeed and wind people up.
Did he not say that Keith, that somebody refused to come on as well?
Igamani, yeah. And that was after day one at Motherwell, where he basically said, "Oh, these guys are hopeless; they need to part their egos."
I think Scott had the nail on the head, Keith, with it when he basically said he's never going to face up to everything when he was on there last night, because this is now the beginning of the media world tour. It's now time to start letting everybody know that I'm available for work. And you're
a million%, Swanee.
My point is, a job interview and said I made a complete mess of that job. It was he's going to say it was everyone else's.
A 1,000,000%. Right?
I did take a bit of a pinch of salt.
He actually said last night, that people get the wrong idea of me. Maybe I didn't handle myself very well in the press conferences. So this was his idea of a relaunch.
Yeah.
Going to that show last night was his idea of going front face and saying to the world, look, guys, you all got me wrong. Here's the real me.
Yeah.
But see, with everything he said last night, I think it was almost a doubling down. It was almost saying, well, that's exactly the guy that I thought you were. So I'm not sure that he's enhanced his chances of getting a job. You guys are probably right. You're probably right, Swanee. Somewhere, some owner somewhere, it might align. It might be magical, and it might all come together for him. But in terms of, trying to explain away how bad that was at Rangers, I don't think he did himself any favours last night. I think he started from a bad position. A little bit like his time in charge of Rangers. He started from a bad position and it quickly deteriorated from there.
You're low on my
That was my take anyway.
He's a big Rangers man, says Russell Martin never won a game in 8. Then Rowe came in and we got results. So that says it all. That's the end of the day. It's about results, isn't it? I mean,
that's
different manager, same group of players.
No.
And it's the same with Martin O'Neill, Wilfred Nancy.
The only thing about that is he knows that he had to hit the ground running. I know he said he tried to change too much, blah, blah, blah. But he knows he had to start winning at the start and straight away. So what was he told from up above? Was he told he was going to get time? Or else, why was he allowed to sanction the signing of so many new players? Well, they tell him, because I remember when he was talking to some of the press, with some of his media stuff, the board are with me, and this is going to take time, and blah, blah, blah. Is that what they sold it? Did they say to him, you'll get time, Russell. You don't have to be winning straight away.
I'm sure that was the conversation.
Mistake, if that was the case.
I'm sure that was the case. But again, you had inexperienced guys making these decisions.
Yeah, and
the fans will be understanding.
Yeah, Andrew Kavanagh rectified it very quickly when he realised it was going wrong. But I think they were maybe even taken aback by the sheer toxicity of it all when it was going so badly. I
would hand him a bit of a pass on it, Andrew Kavanagh, because he was busy taking over the club at that point.
But I mean, he was the guy who stepped in and made the decision. But what he did wrong.
But what he did do when he was trying to get the nuts and bolts nailed down or dealt with in terms of the actual buying, the buyout of the club, he put people in charge of positions and he made mistakes there. He's put people in charge that were not qualified to understand the requirements. And I'm sure these people would have sat down in the room with Russell Martin, given him a wee cuddle and said, oh, don't worry, Martin, Russell, you'll get loads of time here. No, we're really understanding. We're right behind you.
1 win in 8's fine at Rangers. You're rebuilding.
There's nobody any patience here.
One last visit to the comments before we wrap up, guys. Marzuno says Russell Martin's prime Mourinho compared to Nancy. Franny says Russell Martin's Rangers were getting fired on from all areas. Rebel says Loch Lomond swim and -2 is his legacy. Cliff says Keith is 100% correct. Martin was the worst Rangers manager in my lifetime. And your little Muppet says Russell Martin never won a game in 8. Oh, sorry, I read that out earlier. But aye, Rangers fans.
But worth mentioning twice.
I'm on fire tonight, but aye, I think Rangers fans are largely in agreement, Keith.
Yeah, I don't know if there's another way to look at it, to be perfectly honest.
I know.
No.
Well, there is if you're Russell Martin.
If you're Russell Martin, there is.
Which is everybody else is to
I'm
blame.
quite sure there'll be a radio show at some point very soon that Wilfred Nancy will be on saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Can't wait for it.
Yeah.
Hopefully he does it on the Hotline Live. That'd be good. If you're watching.
Yeah, big Wolf boy.
Aye,
Yeah.
Big Wolf. Well, listen, guys, I think for tonight, that brings us to the end of Tuesday night's Hotline Live, brought to you by NordVPN. Thank you very much for all the comments and for everyone watching and listening at home. Swanee, it's always a pleasure having you on.
Hopefully I'll see you soon.
Much
Good to see you,
appreciated.
Dave.
And Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Dan.
We'll be back at 6 p.m. tomorrow to do it all again. Hope you can join us then.
One can only speculate as to what wonders you've done with NordVPN at that point. I can't wait to find out the next instalment.
I've got a big night ahead of me in NordVPN. I'll leave that with you.
Excellent. I'm sure you do.
Thanks for watching. Hope you can join us tomorrow. Cheers.